Good evening, boss lady.
Good evening, Professor. How are we today?
Let's see, we've got this recorded and
Yeah.
we can hear our voices, so we're doing pretty good there. All
I
right.
think we're all set.
We're back again for another night.
We are.
Let's see how this one can go tonight.
I think we're talking something about should I say I'm sorry all the time?
I'm sorry, I didn't know. That wasn't nice. Sorry, folks. Be sorry. Yes. Um, have any questions before I get started?
No, just, should we say we're sorry all the time?
I'm sorry. Wow. Um, I'd say we're in a new world, folks, in this day and age. Um, when I was raised, it was one of those things just out of just being nice, courteous. When something happened, you would say you were sorry. When someone had a death in the family, I'm sorry. Uh, you're you weren't driving correctly and you wound up in the ditch. I'm sorry. It's just politeness. And over time, though, it develops into a habit when a person does that. Uh, I know with myself as I got older and started dealing with the world, if you want to call it that, outside of the small town that I was raised in, um, people acted a little bit different when you started saying "I'm sorry." And
Now, do you mean up north where you moved to or down where you came from? They act different.
oh, I knew he was going to bring up up north.
Okay. No, that's what I
It was a
figured. I
little
just wanted to
different.
be clear.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
there's a difference.
It was more so. I must admit.
Hmm.
But I can say when going down into Mississippi, I ran across a couple of professors when I was in grad school, and in particular, one corrected me and said, "Why are you always sorry about what happened? Did you cause it?" And I thought that was interesting. Also, the person was from the north, but anyway, but it relocated there to be a part of the university, a younger professor. And so I was like, wow, this is very interesting. And so as time has progressed and we've gone through COVID, we all know that people have changed somewhat. The makeup of how we get along as far as dealing with each other. Road rage is more aware. Uh, People are honking if you sit at the red light, even though you're supposed to wait at a particular light where it says don't turn right, red, they're honking at you because they want you to go. Um, I don't know. It's a whole different world. But what it has become, and something we'll cover later, for those of you that are members in our presentation with the masters, at least I'll cover, is that it is showing for you to the other person that you may be responsible. And the reasoning for that is that none of us want to take responsibility for anything anymore. And I included myself in there. I had to catch myself on this. It's not my fault. Um, I get to the gas station and they're closed. What do you mean you're closed? You're supposed to stay open 24 hours. Now, this is what I'm thinking to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no, they're closed and they have it posted that they're closed. This is not my fault. It's always been, open later in night. Um, you have situations where if you're working in retail and your store is supposed to close at a particular time, which I'll be covering later tonight, and a person walks up while you're walking out the door after taking all the cash and getting all your registers down and your money organized, and you've closed out the books, as we say, for the day, and they're wanting to know why are you closing? I need to come in there and shop. And sometimes it gets to the point that if you do open that door back up, they'll even turn around and grab a shopping cart. And then they're just strolling down the aisles. And I've seen this happen, folks, strolling down the aisles. And you're like, you got to be kidding me. I thought you just needed one item. Oh, no, I need a whole shopping list. Here it is. And so
one of those you take an inch or give an inch, they take a
they
mile.
take them all.
Yeah.
And worse yet, the person turned around and texted another family member. And when they were leaving the store, and you turn around, you had to go do the books again, because they got to be right for the evening to close out. And you're going out the store. Here comes the next family member up wanting the same. And it's like, well, we closed, an hour and a half ago. Yeah, but you kept it open, in this case, for my brother-in-law, and I need something too. Are you treating him differently than me? Man,
Yeah,
what do?
never ends.
It never ends. So the other part to that is not that those wonderful people have no problem putting it up on you, that it's you're the one that's getting in their way, you're causing the problem. It also affects your self-esteem. You start questioning yourself. What can I do to keep this from happening in the future? Because it must be my fault. And particularly those of you that are working in customer service, you may feel this because management's teaching you to pretty much take the blame because, as I was trained, the customer's always right. They're never wrong. And this is also bleeding over, though, into individuals that are working in, I will call a company. Of course, we all have customers, but it may be internal customers that you have within the company. Say you're working in a warehouse or something of that nature. And so, you're ready to go home, but the next shift is coming on, or you're working at a computer terminal, at an IT office, the next shift is coming on, and they're telling you they need this, this, and this, and you're like, man, I'll leave in 5 minutes. There's no way I can complete this. And the question becomes, do you stay? Well, if you're an hourly employee, you need to be out of there. You're supposed to go. Your manager may not there to give you permission to have time off, credit hours, whatever you want to call it, the comp time, or even overtime for you. It's time for you to punch that proverbial clock and get out of there. But the person, it's your fault. But the person doesn't sit back and think they should have left you a note or something, not waited to the last minute, or they could have come in early. But it's you. You're in their way. You are causing an obstacle. And how do you deal with that? And the worst part can happen to all that is that ultimately your boss may be challenging you because it may be one of those bosses that like to text you or whatever, telling you to come back into work. And you've got to set standards somewhere. But you start thinking to yourself, is it my fault? So, how do you get around that? Well, first off, I'll tell you what I finally came up with in life. And my response is that I'm sorry for your situation. If I can't get out of the habit and it just slips out of my mouth, I'm sorry. I don't stop there. I keep going. I'm like, oh man, you just let it slip. I'm sorry. Then I add in there, I'm sorry for your situation. I understand, from your perspective. I've been in that also, waiting to the last minute, coming late. I don't tell them that because that'll aggravate them, but there's nothing I can do to help you at this time. And if you don't like using the word "you're" because you think that's going to be a little cheekish or argumentative, then my suggestion is just tell them, I'm sorry about this situation.
I'm sorry about my cough.
That's all right. You've got a cough going.
Going.
I'll keep going a second. So I'm sorry about the situation. Again, I'm not taking ownership for what has happened, but I am trying to tell them that they're going to have to wait until that next chance or that next meeting time when I'm back at work on the clock and I can deal with it. And typically what I tell, individuals is that I'll be back at such and such time and I've got two other things to work on and you'll be number three. And they're like, but I have to have it now. And again, my response is, I'm sorry for your situation or the situation, but my time is up. I'm sure that there's someone else, maybe your manager, that you can speak with to hopefully get this resolved if you need it that quickly.
Yeah, you got to set boundaries.
You do.
And it's hard for people, like you said, that are used to doing it. I mean, I remember, working in the office and you would do that quite a bit, just let them blame it on me and whatever. It's like, but it's really not your fault.
It's not your fault.
Yeah, so
Their
it
lack
takes
of
a while to
foresight.
get out of that. 'Cause you don't want somebody else to feel bad, but when you take the blame, that can cause you a problem.
Yes. In fact, management care enough about that. They think you really are the problem. and they don't pay attention. And I like those, of course, that you turn around and try to help them. And so you're staying over and you made that choice. And then you kind of look around to see where they are, or you send them an email or a text or whatever back since, they came at you 5 minutes before you're supposed to leave. They're nowhere to be found. It's like they gave you their problem, and they're supposed to be on the clock now, not you. They gave you their problem. They're off playing off somewhere. It's all on you. Now you're sitting there and you're like, man, I got to wait for them to get back in contact with me so we can finish this thing up. And of course, it may be a while.
Right.
So what do you do?
Because you gotta wait for them to come back or figure out what they're doing.
So anyway, if you are going to be nice and take the sorry hit, you may want to set some standards with that person. Like, you're going to stay right here with me. We're going to work through this together then. And we'll let the bosses know tomorrow, that this is what we did together. And we need to have something in place so this doesn't happen again, if it's that important. And of course, you always like it when someone, which I'm being cheekish, when someone says the boss says this is what you're supposed to do. And it's like, why didn't the boss call me directly or send me an email directly? On those, it's pretty quick. I just turn around and fire an email or text off to the boss. And then I have a 15-minute rule. If it's a closing time and you haven't responded, then 15 minutes is kind of like the professor in school rule. You give a full professor 15 minutes before you leave. That was the unwritten rule. And anyway, got to take care of yourself and don't feel bad because you did have to walk away from the situation. There'll be complaints, but you got to take care of you.
Definitely. And we've been focusing on that lately because some people really have a problem with that.
Putting it on
as we've done.
Yes.
Yeah, and people put it on us or we take it, and it just affects you. They don't care. They're going on about their business. You gotta.
Now, what other spin for you? But I'm not going to tell you the secret until I get to the end of this. It's a biblical story. I was reading through the literature and trying to think about this, about, I'm sorry, and saying I'm sorry, and meaning that you're sorry. How many times have you said to somebody, I'm sorry? They're like, you're not sorry.
Right.
You don't act like
it's just a habit. You just kind of say it.
Yeah. And even when you meant it, maybe you really said, man, I am really sorry to hear that. You don't mean that. It's like, what are you wanting out of me? Argumentative.
Right.
Bible story. Talked about Jacob last week on our catch up. So we're going to move a little bit forward, but we're going to kind of fast forward the gear here in that we're going to talk about one of Jacob's sons, which was Joseph. We all know Joseph. He was the one that had the coat of many colors, sold into slavery. Some of this stuff I'm going to kind of quickly go over, and some I'm going to spend a little bit more time with. So Jacob was the brother of Esau. Jacob, of course, left his parents when he took Esau's birthright. We called that the mama's boy syndrome because his mother had sent him away. But irrespective, now Jacob has, in his olden years, approximately 90 years old, according to what I can find in the literature, a son. His name was Joseph. Joseph was not the first, though. At that point, he was number 10. But he was born of the woman that Jacob loved most, and which was Rebekah. Jacob had first married Leah because, again, fast forward, this is what was required. He thought he was getting Rebekah, but then he had to work more for Rebekah's father in order to get Rebekah as his real wife, which is what he wanted. But that's a whole nother story because when he slept with the first wife, he thought it was Rebekah, and it turned out to be Leah, her sister. So anyway, over the time, though, there were children that were had to Jacob from Leah, then the one from Rebekah, which was Joseph, and then the concubines of Leah and Rebekah allowed those individuals to sleep with Jacob and have children for him. So the bottom line, we're sitting right now at 11. And Joseph, he was a something. He was Dad's favorite, and probably because he loved Rebekah so much. And so Joseph received from his daddy a coat of many colors that we always hear about. Well, first off, we have to think a second. How did those other brothers feel? the older brothers. They didn't get that, but Joseph got it. Now, if that's not bad enough, the book of Genesis says that Joseph had this little habit of his that he would tell off on his brothers. He would go and check and see what his brothers were doing. He'd go back to Jacob and tell them what they were doing wrong. Just tell off on them.
Oh goodness.
Man, oh man, you tell me you need to get a whipping from your older brothers, for that one.
They really weren't
But
liking what was going on here.
no, Jacob loved him, and they knew that, and they knew that Jacob loved him most. So one day, Jacob told Joseph to go out and check on his brothers and the sheep, and come back and tell him what they're doing. I guess Jacob kind of liked hearing, the little tattletale on what his brothers were doing. Well, a little thing had happened, though, two things before this had occurred. One, Joseph, the child, coat of many colors, was having some dreams. And his first dream was that they had sheaves of wheat that they had bound together. And Joseph was telling his brothers, yep, I had my bundle, and all of you had, well, he didn't say all of you. He just said there were 11 other bundles, and they were all bowing down to my bundle. And remember, I said 11 because we're going to get to that 11th person in just a moment in the brothers. And the brothers were like, we are never going to bow down to you. What are you dreaming about? Well, the other dream that he had was that the sun, moon, and the 11 stars all bowed down to him. And this one he told to his daddy as well. And his daddy's like, Jacob, what are you talking about? But it bothered Jacob because we've missed some ground here in our storytelling, but we'll get to it one of these days, where Jacob actually wrestled with God in one of his dreams when he was a younger lad. So, bothered Jacob. He wasn't sure what this actually meant. So anyway, going back, Joseph was told to go out and check on his brothers and sheep. So here we are, as the Bible used the term, Joseph out there, he's just kind of wandering around. The brothers were supposed to be at X city, and he's kind of wandering around, and just kind of looking at things. He gets close to X city, wandering around again. You could just see him. Just as a young man, he didn't have a care in the world. He was supposed to be a sheep keeper, and probably I'm making some of this up. Maybe I'm not, because the way it was, Joseph's just kind of carefree. So his brothers saw him coming. Oh yeah, that's that person there that says we're going to bow down to him and all that.
Yeah, here comes the tattletale.
And he's the you got it.
I guess they figured that out.
Oh, they hated him. Let's just be honest. I mean, they were so mad at him. Apparently, they were really mad at him because they were going to kill him. In fact, if it weren't for one of the older brothers who said, "Don't do that. Just put him in one of the empty wells, and just don't kill him." So they did so. And the problem or the issue that came up with that particular brother, and the scripture's not clear from what I can gather, but anyway, he had left for just a little bit of time. And when he came back, Joseph was no longer in the well. And what had happened is some merchants had come by, and traders, and they actually sold Joseph to them. And they were headed off to Egypt, and those merchants or traders actually sold Joseph when they got to Egypt. So when this other older brother came back, and where's the child? Because what he wanted to do, according to the Bible, was to get Joseph out of there after the other brothers had left in there. And so he's sold, man. He's gone. It's like, oh my goodness.
That must have really freaked his brother out.
Oh,
wasn't there when he came back.
Like, now they got to tell Dad, Jacob, the one he loved most. They got to tell him, that they sold his son off. No. They had an idea. They turned around and take that nice coat, and they killed an animal, soaked it in the blood, and then they took it back to Jacob and said, here's a wild animal, killed your son, Joseph. Of course, Dad's just so upset, la 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 goes on. Well, Joseph then gets into Egypt. He's sold off. However, God was with him. And as time passed, Joseph was used to tell dreams. And I'm not going to cover that tonight, but just to let you know, by doing that, he finally told Pharaoh what Pharaoh's dreams meant because God was helping Joseph do so. So in that light, Pharaoh was so pleased because there was going to be a period of famine I'm sorry, a period of good harvest, and then 7 years of famine were going to follow. So Joseph was put in charge then of all of Egypt. The only person he reported to was the king, King Pharaoh. Other than that, they called him governor. He was the governor of all Egypt, and the king even said, anything that passes through here will first come through Joseph, and even I'll override that, whatever the man says. Okay? Well, things came to be true in that the good years were there, and then the bad years hit. So when the famine hit, Jacob says in the scripture that the sons were sitting around, and he said, why are y'all sitting here? Go to Egypt, buy some grain so that we don't starve to death. So the boys did so, but he didn't let them take Benjamin. So 10 of them take off. No, 9 of them took off. Because remember, it's 10. Benjamin was 11. That's right. Joseph was 12. Sorry, I got to get the numbers right there. Benjamin stayed back. And the literature, some people say he was born before Joseph went into to slavery in Egypt. Others say no, it was afterwards. I'm just going to take it from the standpoint that he was born afterwards because his mother was quite old. In fact, his daddy was now into the triple digits. And according to what I can read, the mother may have died in childbirth or soon after. So, irrespective, he would not, Jacob, let the youngest one go. Benjamin had to stay with him. So all the brothers took off and they went over to Egypt. Well, when they got there, of course, they had to meet the governor because only the governor could turn around and give grain. And of course, he tells them when he sees them, he knows. Joseph knows it's his brothers, but they don't know it's him. And so he's talking to them, but he has an interpreter. He talks Egyptian, so the interpreter's talking to their particular Jewish language. And so he's calling them liars, thieves, and all this other stuff. Why else would they be over here to get grain and la la la? So anyway, he tells them that they can have grain, and he will let them purchase grain, but they got to bring back the younger son. And he said, well, how did he know about Benjamin? Because he was asking all kinds of questions about their family. See, they got a dad. How's the dad doing? La la la. And so,
and all this time they're not knowing.
Nope, they're just scared to death of the governor because he was the big kahuna, and they knew that he could put them in jail and all this other. So Joseph then, has his servants fill their backpacks, whatever you want to call it, send them back. But when they got close to home, they looked into their bags, and of course they had grain and so on. But the money that they had paid to Joseph's servants for the grain, the person who handled the grain, the money was back in their bags. And they're like, oh my goodness. And they told Jacob, Dad, we got all this grain, but the money, they put it back in here. Somebody must have done that, and he's told us, don't come back unless you bring Benjamin with you, the youngest, to prove we're not lying, And of course, Jacob's like, oh my goodness. Well, wasn't too long after that, they'd ran out of the grain, and they were all getting hungry again on Jacob's farm, if you want to call it that. So Jacob says, y'all got to go back. You got to get more grain. And one of the boys said, Dad, we can't do it. If we do it, he's going to take us all prisoners. We'll be his slaves. And of course, Jacob asked, well, why did you even tell him, you had a brother to begin with? Hey, it's the questions the man was asking, so we just told him the truth. So Jacob finally gave in and said, okay, you can take Benjamin. And of course, one of the brothers told him, look, Dad, if they don't come back, bring Benjamin back, it'll be on me. I will take, your wrath, whatever you give to the day I die, it'll be on me. Anyway, Benjamin went with them. So when they got there, of course, Joseph was so happy to see he had a younger brother. By the way, that brother, as I mentioned, was by Joseph's same mother. So Benjamin and Joseph by the same mother. So happy to see that young lad. He had him come in and sit at tables. Of course, Joseph was there as well. And everybody got fed, but Benjamin's portion, he had the servants put on his plate 5 times what he had for his other brothers. You think he's maybe kind of upset at his other brothers? Or maybe he loved this one more?
Mm-hmm.
What's this thing about, whoever the eldest brother is, that's the one that's going to receive, the birthright or whatever. Didn't we kind of go through that with Jacob and Esau? Okay, I'm going a separate way here. But anyway, the bottom line is he really was treating Benjamin well. So when they were leaving, he gave them all this grain and everything. He told his servant, though, to take Joseph's silver cup and put it into Benjamin's bag. Making it look like Benjamin stole it. So anyway, they send them on their way. They're going back to see their daddy Jacob with all the grain and so on. Well, next thing you know, they get stopped. Joseph's servant, some men were with him. Governor said to stop y'all. You're being accused of stealing. We didn't steal nothing. We didn't take anything. Well, we're looking for his, silver cup. And of course, if any one of us has the cup, that person can be put to death. Brother said, okay. So they started with the eldest brother, went on down. Guess where they found the cup? Benjamin's bag. Oh, and the brother started pleading. Reuben said, oh, take me. Just, take me, make me your slave, servant, whatever. But you can't. This will kill my dad. It'll just, they're like, nope, all of y'all can go free, but this young one has to come back and he will be the slave for the governor. Well, needless to say, they all pack their bags back and they all go back to see Joseph. Well, when they got there to see Joseph, to make this story go a little smoother and faster, Joseph was very excited. Not only was he excited to see Benjamin and the brothers again, but it was time in his mind to show them forgiveness. And he tells them that he's their brother. And I'm using that term forgiveness, but I'm using it quite loosely. He tells them that he's Joseph, the one they sold, they really got. And then he turns around and tells them, don't be afraid. It wasn't you who did this. You had nothing to do with this. It was God's plan for this to occur so that I could protect his people by bringing them here to Egypt. Because remember, Jacob's clan, those were the Israelites coming forward. And so he said it more than once in the literature. This was God's will. It was not your doing. But on the other hand, and I'm being cheekish again, he did turn around and he gave, 20 donkeys. 10 of them had all the best things that he could think of in Egypt to send back to his daddy, Jacob. And another group of them, donkeys, had grain fields to fill everybody's bellies when they got back to Jacob. But he gave all the brothers a new set of clothes. But for Benjamin, he gave him 5 new outfits, and I think it was 300 pieces of silver. He didn't give it to the other brothers. So I guess you can still get even a little bit, even though you quote, don't hold them responsible. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out later.
Yeah. So what happened with the bags in the beginning? I mean, somebody put the
Joseph's servants had done that.
Did he tell them to do it?
Yeah, he told them to do that. In fact, when they came back that second time, when Jacob said, okay, you can take Benjamin, they carried double the money. One was the money that they had been given back the first time they given Joseph, and again, an extra share again to buy for the new food. And just to let you know, when they returned and the cup was in Benjamin's pouch, whatever you want to call it, that the double money was back there again because the servants had been told to put it in there. But the key to this, and I want to carry this just a little bit forward, and this is my opinion, folks. For the bad things that happen in your life, the employee who tattletales on you and it gets you in trouble with the boss, maybe you did say it, maybe you didn't. I'm not going there. For the boss that gives you a hard time and finally takes your job and you're jobless. Okay? The bad things that you think about those people and you want to hold them accountable, you're going to get them back someday. The boss that was relentless with you while you worked for them and you just were so happy when they finally, it just held a grudge on you. Ask yourself one question. And that question is, when you went through that pain, did you become closer to God? And the answer to the question for me is if yes, then just do the same as Joseph said. It's not their doing. God's using them. Are you blaming God? That's not what I said. I said, God's using them in order to make you closer to him, which is God. Consider it a blessing. Joseph, you can say, but he knew. Somewhat he did, somewhat he didn't. But he knew in the end when he saw his brothers come back. And he had heard, of course, what Jacob had told him, that God had told Jacob. He got it figured out. So this wanderer, we'll call him a mama's boy also, like his daddy had been, this person that was the tattletale and so on, in the end, he was and hurt. Don't get me wrong. He's put in prison and everything else. In the end, he holds no one accountable for what happened to him because it brought him closer to God and he was doing God's work. So I'm going to end tonight and say, when all this happened, if it drew you closer to God and thinking more of God, then don't hold the other people accountable. Be thankful because God was working through them to get to you. Yeah. And now we're there.
Awesome.
And it also makes more sense then, to me at least, in the New Testament when you read the words of the writers, Paul and so on, Jesus, we should take into consideration when people do us wrong, that we should give glory to God. And to me, that means because God's working through them to draw us closer to him. Tough stories in the Bible. It's hard on people. You'd be like, man, oh my God, it was so hard on them, and others kind of got by cheaper or easier. But the answer is sometimes it takes, at least for me, a good brick or a big hammer to kind of hit me on the head to wake me up. That big stick sometimes works.
Yeah. And we see that in life, people say, oh, look how easy they have it. I mean, life is a roller coaster, but like you said, these tragedies and, things that happen, a lot of times it does draw you closer to God and appreciate it, near-death experiences and things like that. So,
yes.
Yeah. It's bad, but then it turns out good.
In the long run.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I'm not going to say I forgive you. I'm going to say that's the way God wanted it. And I'm glad you were there, whoever that person be, that I thought hurt me, because you helped me to draw closer to God.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry you had to listen to me tonight.
And it's always a lesson.
It's always a
We're
lesson.
not sorry.
Okay, we're not sorry. We're sorry for the situation. Your situation, my situation. That's all I got tonight, boss.
All right. Well, love it. Awesome. Good message there, Professor.
Thank you, folks.
Yes.
Thank you, boss.
Thank you for joining us.
We'll try it again next week. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.